Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, bed crimers. As always, I wish you the best. To anyone new here, a warm welcome. Thank you for checking out my channel. Let me just ask that after listening to or watching this video, if you learned something or enjoyed it, please do me a favor and smash that like button. Now, let's dig in.
These are the last known images of Amy Lynn Bradley. Amy disappeared 20 years ago this month while vacationing with her parents and brother on a Royal Caribbean International cruise liner Rhapsody of the Seas. FBI Special Agent Aaron Sheridan says a few days into the trip, somewhere between Aruba and Curacao, Netherlands Antilles, Amy and her brother went to a disco.
By the morning of March 24th, 1998, her parents go and try to search for her, and she's nowhere to be found.
Many details of Amy's night out remain a mystery. The FBI is offering a reward of up to $25,000 for information leading to Amy's recovery and the conviction of those responsible for her disappearance. These are aged, progressed photographs of what Amy would look like today. Amy's mother, Iva.
We get up every single day with the thought that maybe today we'll find Amy. Here she is graduating from college. Here she is playing soccer.
Since Agent Sheridan took over the case, she has made a connection to the family.
We will never rest. We will definitely do our best to bring closure to her family. I feel it is my mission.
In this lifetime, when you find somebody that cares, it matters. So we're very excited about her working on this case.
Report tips, which can be anonymous, to your local FBI field office.
In 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, more than 13.7 million passengers embarked on cruise ships from U.S. ports with the promise of a grand adventure, effortless travel by sea to multiple destinations, unlimited buffets overflowing with enticing foods, cocktails flowing in 24/7 nightclubs, on-deck pools, workout rooms, soft ocean breezes on private balconies, and more. Cruises can seem like dream vacations, but there's an occasional dark side to these floating Disneylands for adults. Sometimes the number of passengers who get on the ship at the cruise's start is higher than the number of passengers who depart at the cruise's end, meaning sometimes passengers don't make it home. Over the past 20 years, 400 people have gone missing from cruise ships. While that number may seem small compared to the number of passengers who take cruises, you have to remember that each one of those 400 human beings were important to someone, and the experience of boarding a ship with a loved one and then having to leave without that person because they vanished has got to be beyond traumatic. The family will always wonder what happened to their loved one. Did he or she accidentally fall overboard without anyone seeing? Did someone push him or her into the sea? Did he or she deliberately jump overboard due to depression or too many cocktails in the bar? Did the loved one disappear because someone grabbed them against their will and ferried them away, perhaps for the human trafficking trade? This is Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T, and this is The Mysterious Disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. On March 21st of 1998, 23-year-old Amy Lynn Bradley boarded a 1,000-foot Royal Caribbean International cruise ship named the Rhapsody of the Sea in Puerto Rico. The ship was scheduled to head first to the island of Aruba, then to Curacao, then to Saint Martin, and finally to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands before heading back to Puerto Rico. The Chesterfield, Virginia resident was with her parents, Ron and Iva Bradley, and her younger brother, then 21-year-old Brad. Amy's father, Ron, who worked as an insurance executive, had been awarded the 7-day cruise from his company, and he wanted to share it with his wife and adult children. When Iva and Brad heard about the upcoming adventure at sea, they were immediately excited. The couple's daughter, Amy, however, had the opposite reaction. Although she was a skilled swimmer and had been trained as a lifeguard, Amy felt trepidation about being on a heavy, massive vessel at sea. And anyone who knows about the Titanic can probably relate to that. But eventually Amy came around and decided to go on the cruise, and the family viewed the trip as a celebratory vacation for Amy's recent graduation from Longwood University. One thing to know about Amy is that once she was on the ship, she would not go anywhere near the rails. She was terrified of possibly falling over. Let's join the Bradleys on their cruise and experience the events that occurred in their real time back in 1998. The first 2 days of the cruise are postcard perfect. Everyone's having a wonderful time. Fast forward to the evening of March 23rd. The ship is headed to Curacao, a tiny island off the coast of Venezuela. After dinner and some entertainment, Amy and Brad's parents, Ron and Iva, decide to retire to their 8th deck cabin at around 1:30 a.m. Amy and Brad, however, aren't ready to call it a night. They head to the ship's deck where a calypso party is going down. That night, a band called Blue Orchid is playing.
It was music, and we did the limbo contest, which I won that night. Just having drinks, having a good time.
There's a lot of late night dancing and drinking. Some of the band members end up chatting with Amy. One in particular, the bass player, a guy named Alistair Douglas, who goes by the nickname Yellow, takes a particular interest in her. In fact, there's footage of Yellow dancing with Amy. Earlier in the cruise, Amy's mother, Iva, noticed the odd behavior of some of the ship's crew around her daughter. For example, when the ship was docked in Aruba, a waiter in the ship's dining room came up to Iva and Ron after dinner and asked where Amy was. Iva asked him why he wanted to know, and he told her that he and some other crew members wanted to take Amy to Carlos and Charlie's in downtown Aruba that night. Note that that's the same bar that Natalie Holloway was at before she went missing. Holloway is the Alabama teenager who vanished in Aruba in May of 2005 during a high school graduation trip. When Amy came back to the table, Iva told her about the waiter and crew wanting to take her out, and Amy replied, "They're creepy, and I'm not going anywhere with them." End quote. Back to the party. Brad ends up leaving before Amy. The ship's computerized door lock system records him entering the family cabin at 3:35 a.m. 5 minutes later, Amy arrives back to the cabin. Brad and Amy decide to sit in lounge chairs on the cabin's balcony to talk before they go to bed. At some point, Brad gets sleepy and heads inside. Amy, however, tells him she wants to stay out a little longer for some more fresh sea air. Sometime between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m., Amy's groggy father, Ron, briefly wakes up and looks out the window. He sees Amy, presumably asleep in a chair on the balcony. Ron will later describe for the local papers that he only saw his daughter from the hips down. Ron falls back asleep for about 20 minutes more. When he stirs a second time, at 6 a.m., Amy is gone, along with her cigarettes and lighter. Ron gets up and peeks inside her room, but Amy's not there. Her sandals and purse, however, are. Ron's wondering where would Amy go without her shoes and without her purse. He then heads out of the cabin to search the ship's common areas. He reasons that maybe his daughter went up on deck to get a cup of coffee, but his search is fruitless. Amy isn't on deck. This is hitting Ron as very alarming because Amy's not the type of daughter to just leave and not tell her family where she's going, especially when they're on a family vacation and they're sharing the same cabin. At 7 a.m., Ron wakes Iva up, and she immediately can tell that something's wrong. When Brad hears the news, he heads up on deck to look for his sister. When Brad is unable to find Amy, the Bradleys report her disappearance to the captain. Ron and Iva beg the captain to make a shipwide announcement and to keep all 3,000 passengers from disembarking the ship to visit Curacao until Amy is found. They also want the crew to share Amy's photo with the passengers. The captain replies, "I cannot do that. It will disturb the other guests." Finally, at 7:50 a.m., after most of the passengers have left the ship, an announcement is made requesting that Amy make her way to the purser's deck. Amy does not show up. The cruise staff then searches the ship between 12:15 p.m. and 1 p.m. However, they refuse to search the other passengers' cabins and their staff's cabins. According to Iva, at this point the family was in absolute anguish. She said her son Brad was in the fetal position. Her husband Ron was vomiting blood, and she no longer had feeling in her arms. After the crew's search, the captain tells the Bradleys that Amy is not on the ship. He suggests that she may have fallen overboard. Iva is like, no way. The ship was so close to the island that Amy could have swam to shore. And Brad pipes in that Amy was so fearful of being at sea that she wouldn't even go near the guardrails. The captain makes other suggestions as well, such as perhaps Amy deliberately jumped into the ocean. The Bradleys shoot that notion down. They argue that she's a happy person and she had a lot to look forward to back home, including a new career in sports psychology and a new bulldog that she just adopted. Listen to what her brother Brad said on the show Vanished.
Knowing the type of person that she is, and the fact that she had just graduated from college, had just gotten a new English bulldog, which she'd always wanted. As far as jumping from the ship, just never been a possibility in my mind.
5 p.m. comes and neither the family nor the crew has found Amy. The captain suggests that the Bradleys get off the ship to search for Amy in Curacao. At 5:30 p.m., the Bradleys take the crew's suggestion and they depart the ship. Leaving the security of the ship is understandably frightening for them, and their fears are made all the worse because they're heading onto an island that they basically know nothing about. Adding to that, they have to search quickly because in 4 hours, the ship will depart.
It's the hardest thing I've ever done. You just are kind of stunned and you leave.
We're in a foreign country. We don't know what to do. We're trying to get in touch with authorities. We're trying to get in touch with the embassy. That was closed. It was complete chaos.
The family decides to contact the authorities and get in touch with the FBI. The FBI tells them it's going to take another 24 hours for them to reach the island. The Bradleys decide to remain in Curacao that night, and they watch as the ship departs without them. It is a sinking feeling. The FBI then calls the Bradleys to let them know that the ship was not thoroughly searched as the captain had promised. When the FBI agents arrive, they rush to the island of St. Thomas with the Bradleys. They want to confront the ship's captain. Amy's mother tells the captain she knows he lied to her and that he and the crew had not thoroughly searched the ship. She asks him to allow the FBI on board, and he complies.
I looked at the captain eyeball to eyeball, and I told him, I said, you lied to us. You did not search this ship in its entirety. I said it would behoove you to let the FBI on here so we can find out who has Amy.
So on March 26th, the Bradleys, accompanied by the FBI, conduct a search of the ship. The FBI does what they call a bomb search. The agents have crew members walk around with a picture of Amy, and at the same time, FBI agents are looking in every cupboard everywhere they can think of that somebody could hide a person. While this is going on, the Bradleys help to conduct the search, and as they're doing it, 2 college-aged young women rush over to them and tell them that they saw Amy around 5:45 a.m. on the morning of her disappearance with a band member taking an elevator to the ship's deck. They say Amy was holding cigarettes and a lighter. Remember, those are the only things that Amy's dad noticed missing from her cabin. The girls also tell the Bradleys that the band member Amy was with was Yellow, a.k.a. Alistair Douglas.
We were just walking down the hallway, and these 2 college-age girls, they came screaming up to us, just frantic. We saw Amy with a band member. We saw Amy, and we couldn't find you. Where have you been? And we said, well, we just got back on the ship. What are you talking about?
The girls claim that around 5:45 a.m., they saw Amy heading back to the ship's all-night dance club with the band's bass player, a Grenadian man by the name of Alistair Douglas.
Hearing that the person who last interacted with Amy is Alistair Douglas, a man the family knows nothing about, the Bradleys are determined to get answers out of him. Amy's brother then tells their parents that he saw his sister dancing with Douglas at the club, and then he suddenly recalls a strange interaction he had with Alistair Douglas on the morning Amy disappeared.
He comes up to me, and the first thing he said was, he said, "Hey man, I'm sorry to hear about your sister."
So Alistair was telling Brad that he was sorry about Amy's disappearance well before anyone other than the Bradleys, the captain, and his security staff knew about the situation. The Bradleys alert the FBI to this information, and they bring in Alistair Douglas for questioning. Douglas then vehemently denies knowing about Amy's disappearance, which causes the Bradleys even more alarm. Why is he now lying? Douglas is then given a polygraph, but according to the FBI, there's not enough evidence to hold him, and when Douglas comes out of the room where he took the polygraph, he's smiling, and he gives a thumbs up to his crew friends.
He came out with a thumbs up and kind of smiling like everything's cool. And it was all I could do to keep my composure at that time.
If all of this isn't alarming enough, the Bradleys are then told that all the photos taken by the ship's crew in which Amy appeared have disappeared. And get this, the photos of Amy vanished 9 to 10 hours before she went missing. The FBI and the Bradleys try to find out who removed the photos, but no one's copping to it. As the Bradleys reflect on all these strange happenings, they begin to consider the possibility that Amy, maybe, was taken. Iva feels that someone on that ship saw her daughter and decided they wanted her. Iva and Ron will later say that they felt from the very beginning of this nightmare that someone on the ship saw her and took her either by boat, by cargo, or through the cargo doors that open and close. And they feared then that Amy may have been taken by human traffickers. Tragically, the FBI doesn't come up with enough information to charge anyone in connection with Amy's disappearance at that time. So on March 28th, the cruise is over and Amy's family is left in despair. They spend 4 fruitless days in Curacao searching before they return home to Virginia. They then set up a hotline and a website for information about Amy, and they wage a campaign in the media to generate attention and get Amy's face out to the world. They also offer a reward of $200,000. At this point, the family is fairly certain that Amy did not fall overboard because her body hasn't been found in the water. On April 21st, so about 2 to 3 weeks after the cruise ended, Ron and Brad fly back to Curacao to search again for Amy. A cab driver recognizes Amy's photo, and he tells the Bradleys that Amy is on the island. The The man says that Amy approached him on the day she went missing, looking frantic and saying she urgently needed to get to a phone. The man says that he remembers Amy because of her green eyes. The Bradleys continue to search everywhere. They go into huts, they check out boats, all to no avail. 4 days into their search, as father and son are driving in Curacao, Brad thinks he hears Amy call out his name from a passing van.
I heard Amy call my name. Pretty distinctive growing up my whole life with the way that she would say my name and call me.
Brad and Ron make a quick U-turn and follow the van. When they finally catch up and look inside, they see that only the driver is in it. Brad questions now if he really heard Amy or not. If Amy is on Curacao, whoever has her is doing a very good job of keeping her under wraps. After a frustrating week, Ron and Brad head back on a plane to go home. During their layover in Miami, Ron gets a call from Iva. She tells him that the harbor chief in Curacao called to say that they found a body. It's a female with brown hair, and he thinks it's Amy. Ron, Brad, and Iva were now at their lowest point. The chief tells the family that they'll have to wait 24 hours to get their results back. Those 24 hours are excruciating. The next day, the chief calls back to say that the body turned out to be a male. The Bradleys let out a collective sigh of relief. Months go by, and Amy is not found. The Bradleys are beside themselves with worry. The most intriguing lead that comes into the hotline is from a 46-year-old man named David Carmichael, a Canadian computer engineer and scuba diver who is certain he saw Amy walking down a beach in Curacao in August of 1998 with 2 men. So that would have been 5 months after Amy vanished from the ship. Carmichael says that the woman looked frightened and like she was about to say something when one of the guys motioned her away and gave him, Carmichael, a menacing look. Carmichael said the woman continued to constantly try and get his attention until he lost sight of her at a nearby cafe. Carmichael said he was about 2 feet away from the woman, and she had tattoos identical to Amy's. Amy has the following tattoos: a Tasmanian devil spinning a basketball on her shoulder, the sun on her lower back, a Chinese symbol on her right ankle, and a gecko lizard on her navel. She also has a navel ring. Carmichael thought nothing of the incident until that December when he saw a picture of Amy on America's Most Wanted. Carmichael, who even flew to Virginia to meet Amy's family, stated, "I was stunned. I'm haunted by that encounter with Amy. I know it was her," end quote. Fast forward to January of 1999, and Amy was still missing. In January, a U.S. Navy petty officer tells the authorities that he saw a woman who claimed to be Amy Bradley at a brothel in Curacao. He claims she told him that her name was Amy Bradley, and she begged him for help, explaining that she was being held against her will and not allowed to leave. The petty officer said he didn't report the incident earlier for fear he'd get into trouble with the Navy. The petty officer only contacted Amy's family after he retired and saw Amy's photo on the cover of a magazine. When investigators went to the brothel's address, they discovered that the building had burned down and the brothel was no longer there. In the fall of 1999, Amy's parents receive an email from a self-proclaimed Navy SEAL named Frank Jones. Frank tells Ron and Iva that he's a former U.S. Army Special Forces officer with a team of experienced soldiers who might be able to rescue Amy. Frank says that his team has seen Amy and she's being held by heavily armed Colombian personnel in a housing complex surrounded by barbed wire. Jones provides an accurate description of Amy's tattoos, and he even sings part of a lullaby that Iva used to sing to Amy. Over the next few months, Frank feeds news to the family and provides reports on sightings. When Frank says his team is ready to attempt a rescue, he tells the Bradleys that he needs a final payment of $100,000 to fund the rescue. Ron Bradley goes to his boss to ask if he can borrow the money. The boss agrees, but he sends a tough man with connections named Tim Bulkhouse to Curacao first to check out Frank Jones. Buck Holtz finds Jones kicking back and drinking rum. Turns out Jones is a con artist. By this point, Jones had managed to scam the Bradleys out of nearly $25,000, as well as the nearly $187,000 from the National Missing Children's Organization. The Bradleys are both crushed and angry. In February of 2002, federal prosecutors in Richmond, Virginia, charged Frank Jones with defrauding the Bradleys of $24,444 and the National Missing Children's Organization of $186,416. Jones pleads guilty in April of mail fraud and is sentenced to 5 years in prison. In my opinion, there should be a special place in hell for people who take advantage of crime victims' families' desperation. In 2005, a witness named Judy Maurer comes forward to say that she saw Amy in a department store restroom in Bridgetown, Barbados. She claims a very distraught-looking woman entered the restroom accompanied by 3 men who proceeded to threaten her if she did not follow through on a deal. Maurer alleges that after the men left, she approached the woman who said her first name was Amy and that she was from Virginia before the men re-entered and dragged her away violently. Maurer called the authorities, and they created composite sketches of the 3 men and the woman. Here's the sketch of the woman Maurer said she saw. Note that this sketch will later look eerily similar to photos of a woman named Jas, who works in an industry where women are forced into intimate acts with strangers. Also occurring in 2005, Amy's parents appear on Dr. Phil to talk about Amy's disappearance, and they appeal to the public for help. The 2 photos of this Jas person are shown. The woman in the photos bears a striking resemblance to Amy. Take a look. Jas is wearing lingerie, looks distressed, and is posing on a bed. The photos had been posted on a now-defunct website advertising adult holidays in the Caribbean. The site identified the woman as Jas, and it offered all-inclusive erotic vacations costing around $2,750 and offering free access to all the women like Jas as part of the package. Sick. Today, that domain can no longer be found. The Bradleys later revealed in an episode of the show Vanished that an independent forensics expert told them the picture was a perfect match for Amy. Iva said, "When I first looked at the picture, it wasn't the Amy I know. The picture looks like a harsh and tormented Amy." End quote. But when Iva squinted her eyes and looked at this Jas person, she suddenly saw Amy. It's so sad because nothing ever came of this. In 2010, bone fragments were discovered in Aruba. After doing DNA testing to see if there was a match to the DNA of Natalie Holloway's mother, and finding there wasn't, the authorities ceased any further testing on the fragments, despite the fact that there were 9 other Caribbean vacationers that were said to be missing. Like, what in the world is going on? Can't somebody in the American embassy arrange to have this fragment tested to see if it matches anyone else? The only thing the authorities have said is that the bone is human and likely of Caucasian origin. A forensic scientist named Jason Kolowski said this on the Oxygen series, The Disappearance of Natalie Holloway. Out of the 4 individual bone samples, only 1 was found to be human. We don't know if the person is male or female. We don't know how old that person is. We don't know how long that person has been dead. end quote. And the identity of the person whose DNA is on that bone remains unknown to this day. Despite all these sightings, there has never been any definitive proof that any of them were actually Amy Lynn Bradley. On March 12th of 2010, 12 years after her disappearance, Amy was declared legally dead, but thankfully, Amy's case remains open as the FBI continues to ask for anyone with information about the case to come forward. The FBI is currently offering a reward of up to $25,000 for any information that could lead to Amy's recovery. On top of that, the family, the Bradleys, are offering $250,000 for information leading to Amy's safe return. They also have a reward for $50,000 for information leading to Amy's current location. Now, Amy's brother Brad started a band at some point called Amy's Brothers Band, aptly named, and he has a Facebook page dedicated to the band. However, the last comments were made back in 2018, so it's unclear if he continues to perform with the band. Amy's mother, Iva, is now 70 years old, and her father, Ron, is 71. They continue to reside in Chesterfield, Virginia, and they continue to hope that one day they will be reunited with their precious daughter, Amy. Amy would now be 48 years old. If you have any information concerning the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley, please contact your local FBI office or the nearest American embassy or consulate. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories. If you found this episode enjoyable and interesting, please smash the like button, consider subscribing, consider a membership if you want to support the work I do, and I'll see you next time.